Hi, I'm Tom Hooper, director.
Hi, I'm Andy Harris, the producer.
And I'm Michael Sheen, who plays Brian Clough.
So the opening of the film, we went through quite a few different versions at the script stage. I think initially we started with Don Revie in the boardroom announcing he's getting the job. And in the end, we decided we have to set the context of English football in 1974. And so we came up with this archive opening.
Maybe, Andy, you could talk a little bit about how at one point we had a bit of difficulty getting agreement to be able to film at Elland Road.
Yes, well, of course, many of the players are still alive and still very much around at Leeds United today, and they are part of something called the Golden Era. These are all the players who basically played with Don Revie, and some of those players had definitely didn't like the book that this was based on, and at one point, a week into the filming, their objections forced the Leeds United chairman to question whether we would be allowed to film, and permission was withdrawn. So it was quite a tricky time because obviously we had to use Leeds United. We wanted to use Leeds United to film it. And myself and Peter Morgan went to meet 3 or 4 of the old players. And we made a sort of presentation. We showed them some very early rushes. Peter read them chunks of the script. And we did our very best to persuade them that they would, that we thought they would like the film when it was finished. And after about 2 rather tense hours, they gave us permission to film there, which was great.
And then our film begins with the Leeds players, footage of the Leeds players sort of basically beating up the rest of the English Football League, having assured them that it wasn't going to be a hatchet job, which of course it isn't. But that must have been quite a tricky moment when they actually watched it.
Yes, on Thursday, Michael, I watched it up in Leeds with Gordon McQueen, Peter Lorimer, Eddie Gray, sitting along the aisle from me, and I must admit, I was slightly nervous about the response, but they loved the film and were very gracious about it before and most importantly afterwards.
Mm-hmm. I remember the film, an early version of the script, opening with Brian Clough sort of towards the end of his life, sitting in a chair a la Jake LaMotta in Raging Bull, and reciting the lyrics to My Way, Frank Sinatra's My Way. And that sort of bookended the script. Do you remember?
Yeah, it was a kind of aging Clough who basically said he made 2 great mistakes in his life. Or no, he had 2 big regrets: his injury, and his second regret was the 44 days he spent in Leeds United, and that brought us into the story. What was problematic about it is when you came to the end of the film, you have the older Clough giving a précis of the rest of his life after the film ended, and it ended up sort of conjuring the image of the complexity of the rest of his life, which left you feeling slightly unsatisfied, as if you wanted to see more. And I felt it was better and Peter Morgan felt it was better to concentrate on this pure period.
I think rather interesting, David Peace had a similar notion as well. When he told us when he was writing the book, he also wrote later sections with Clough in the declining years, but also decided to junk them too, which was kind of interesting.
Watching this, I'm reminded of the many happy hours I spent in that car with the 2 lovely lads singing What's New Pussycat over and over again. That was a lot of fun.
And we actually covered it 2 different ways, Michael. We did was it Old Black Magic, Frank Sinatra?
That's right, Old Black Magic and What's New Pussycat.
And it was indicative of the fact that we spent some time searching for the tone, because Old Black Magic, I suppose, would have been more in keeping with the piece sense of sort of mystery and darkness, and What's New Pussycat's much more comedic. And I think as we shot it fairly early on, we were still sort of, we wanted that freedom to nail the tone in the editing room.
And of course, this is what sort of bookends the film, these Yorkshire TV calendar interviews, which exist, and pretty much everything, well, a lot of what we say in this interview and the one at the end is what actually happened. Although I think this interview, there were 3 reporters, weren't there, in actuality?
The real one.
There were 3 reporters, and this began. The actual interview begins with Austin Mitchell introducing Clough by showing the footage of Clough being injured. Now, of course, this is a big element of the film that's not in the film, but I felt very much behind what I was trying to do with the character. That he was a brilliant goal scorer in his day, and then it was cut short through injury. He had playing against Bury, I think it was, and had a collision with the goalkeeper. and injured his cruciate ligaments, which then there was nothing you could do about it. Now it's something that can be repaired.
Oh, is it?
Fairly easily,
Oh,
yeah.
God,
But
that's
in
tragic,
that day, you couldn't, and so it brought an end to his career. And then how he felt he was dealt with afterwards by the brass buttons brigade, as he calls them, sort of gave him a lot of resentment and anger. But at the beginning of this Yorkshire TV interview, the calendar interview, they show the footage of him being injured, and it's horrible to watch, and obviously very horrible for Brian to watch. And in the actual footage, you see Brian watching this him being injured, and he's not aware that the camera is actually on him, and you see this look on his face, an extraordinary kind of vulnerable, hurt look. And then he realizes the camera's on him, and he does that thing that actually I do at the beginning of this section now, which is where suddenly he sort of throws his head up and his tongue goes up to the top of his mouth, and there's that brash arrogance that we sort of know of Clough. But maybe, Tom, you could sort of talk about why we ended up cutting that.
It's interesting because it was in. I mean, I like Michael felt that his injury and this desire, this idea that David Peace had, that Brian Clough wanted to take revenge on the world because his career had been so brutally cut short, was a key driver in his life, and we had it in the script, and then we had it in the cut for quite a long time. But in the end, it's a classic example of how a structure of film in the end dictates. It dictates itself, or it dictates its own decisions, because if you interrupt the flow of the kind of sunny optimism of Clough and his arrogance as he arrives with this darkness, it began to feel a little out of keeping. And also within the contained world of our story, we wanted to root his anger and a lot of the aggression of his ambitious drive in Revie's snub of him at Derby County, and for that to be the heart of our film, that was the kind of point in history we needed to go back to explain the rivalry relationship that so drives the movie. But it's a good example of the problem of making biographical fiction, where you intellectually, I think Michael, I and Peter all knew this was very important, but it didn't sit comfortably in the structure of what we were doing, because we framed it as a rivalry story.
Yeah,
this is Elland Road. This is the real Elland Road.
Yes, absolutely. And the sign, of course, we put up at some considerable expense, didn't we, Tom?
Yeah, and this is the West Stand. And I was coming back on the train from the Leeds premiere, and I had a very kind of emotional moment, because all those red warehouses have just been levelled.
No.
And literally the recreation of this film at this place, if we'd waited to this summer, we couldn't have done it. I mean, we're so on the edge of this kind of vanishing footballing Britain. And of course, with the warehouses gone, you see, the motorway roaring past, and we couldn't have filmed it.
I was watching the documentary about Brian that was on, a little while ago, and what that scene that was just on, where he turns up in the car and all the reporters are there and everything. I'd never seen the actual footage of that before, and I saw it in the documentary, and it was amazing. I mean, we really got that right.
Yeah,
that looks exactly, and obviously we're in the same place, but.
This is inside Elland Road
to see.
now, isn't it? And Tom, we added all the interiors are of course part of us.
But the training pitch that we use, we had to build, didn't we? Because
we
that's
had to
now a
turf
car
out a
park.
car park, yeah.
But it used to be that the training pitch was exactly where it is in the film, but now it's a car park, so we had to make a training pitch.
Yeah. And this was actually a set, so it's not at the real Elland Road.
And this is Henry Goodman, fantastic actor, who I've seen a lot more of his theatre work really than his film work, but he's a fantastic film screen actor as well as theatre actor. A marvellous Shylock in The Merchant of Venice at the National Theatre.
And a pretty good dead ringer for Manny Cousin.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really good. I remember that he has such power, Henry, as an actor, and such strength, and I thought it was really restrained what he did in the film. It was really good, because he could have sort of gone much bigger with it, but I thought it was very subtle and very pulled back, and it's wonderful.
The best for this club, for the city of Leeds. So why do I get the feeling this is all about you and Don?
Of course, it's just about me and Don. Always has been.
And I always saw this as the scene which kind of says, this guy has a real problem. What's his fucking problem? Let's go on a journey to discover it, which is what launched us into our first flashback in this intercutting structure.
It was quite playing the thing about Clough that everyone remembers, I suppose, and talks about, is that arrogance, it's the old big head thing. And this scene, in a way, was the one scene out of everything where I just really had to go for that, and not play anything else that was going on at the same time. And it was quite exposing. It felt quite vulnerable doing that, just doing it, just being arrogant and brash, because everything that I was trying to do was about something else going on underneath and how that sort of plays together. And so it was quite scary doing that scene.
But I think it was why it was the right decision, because it posed the question mark that the flashback needed to answer. You kind of thought, why on earth would a guy say this on his first day at work?
I have to just before this scene that's coming up now, one of my favourite things in the whole film is that when we were shooting this, we had to try and get the kids to be really excited about the fact that Leeds United, we'd drawn Leeds United in the cup. And I remember you saying, Tom, and me saying, oh, that little kid's name is Frank, who is an absolute star. And so we were saying, right, when we get Leeds United, just shout, jump up and down, Leeds United, hooray. And then when Jim Broadbent's character, Sam Longston, says about, going to get a curry, chicken boona, the scene ends with a little girl going, chicken boona, and totally unprompted. And that now has become me, whenever anything exciting happens in my life, I now go, chicken boona, just like little girl Isabella, I think her name is.
And this is the introduction of both Jim Broadbent and Timothy Spall. We came to cast Jim in the best possible way, which is he rang us up and suggested that he should play Sam Longston. And of course, the moment he said it, I thought, well, we would be bloody lucky because he's perfect for the role. I'd worked with him on the film Longford, where he played Lord Longford, which Andy had produced and Peter Morgan written, and we were very fond of each other, so it was great to be reunited. And it's also the introduction of Timothy Spall, who I think has such wonderful heart in the portrayal of this character. I think it's
now then, one of the oldest football grounds in the UK.
Yes, Chesterfield FC, soon to be redeveloped as a supermarket. I mean, this is all going to be levelled, and I can't tell you enough how difficult it was to find football stands, football grounds that captured the feel of the old grounds, and it really is, as I said, it's a vanishing Britain. This world will soon be gone, and it would be incredibly difficult and expensive to recreate it if it wasn't there. And there's something about the broken down textures what it really speaks of is the poverty of football in the 60s, and I think it's hard, for a young football fan now to understand how impoverished the game was then. And the look of it was very dictated by its economic circumstances. I mean, Duncan Hamilton, in his book, Provided You Don't Kiss Me, quotes people as predicting, that the game was going to die out within 20 years. These people writing in the late 60s.
This when we went to this is in Bradford, isn't it?
No, this is in Leeds.
Yeah, this is
in Leeds,
Road,
sorry, yeah. And when we went to up that street at the back where those houses are, that's where we did the Leeds coach arriving, wasn't it?
Yeah, yes,
is that right?
yeah.
And I remember when we turned up there on the day, and we were driving down there just to go to the set. I remember thinking, God, this is amazing. The set dressers made this really look like it's back in the 50s or something. This is incredible. And then I realised that is actually what it looks like. It's sort of like in a bit of a time warp, isn't it?
And this is a good example of, in terms of the compositional style I was striving for. We were shooting these close-ups on a 27mm lens, which is quite a wide lens. But what it means is it makes it uses the background in a wide and graphic way, and the focus is held pretty well to the background, so that you have the face in stark relief to the landscape. And I was very interested, even in the close shots, in pulling the landscape and the world of Clough into the shots.
Very Tom Hooper shot, I think.
Yeah. No, I love that. I fell in love with that location. In fact, I had a memorable moment with the location manager who was struggling to find the terraces that I wanted, and we were standing at Elland Road, and I looked behind him, and there on the skyline was this amazing row of red brick terraced houses, and I said, what about that terrace? Also, apparently it's the home of the 7/7 bombers, rather bizarre.
Yeah. I just remember that I spent the first week of the film with a terrible cold. And this reminds me, listening to me doing it. Now this always makes me laugh, the idea of putting down a towel, an orange, and an ashtray for the away team.
Yes, Michael and I seem to really respond to the idea of Clough's neurosis. In fact, shot plenty more neurosis that didn't make it.
We did a lot of that, didn't we?
We enjoyed it. Obviously tapped into something. Now this is not a set. This is the inside of Chesterfield FC. This is a real location, and this is pretty much what it looks like when we've obviously propped it out.
Wasn't this day one?
Yeah, this was day. Yes, correct. This was the very first scene we shot.
Yeah, very first.
So we hit the ground running. And I think what I was very driven by in my portrayal of the late 60s football was the more I looked at the photographic references in the archive, I realised it wasn't about capturing the late 60s, which we tend to think of in terms of the kind of revolution in design and fashion and social mores that was happening, I suppose, concentrated in London. It's really making a statement about the 1950s. And so when I was filming, creating 68, 69 Derby County, I was always thinking about, I'm recreating the 1950s with those kind of looks. And one of the reasons I like those interiors is that kind of panelled oak has a wonderful sort of 1950s feel.
Maurice Reeves playing Jimmy Gordon, who great face.
Great actor too.
Yeah, fantastic. And he he's that face just gives you a whole world.
Yeah.
And I really believe that he's been around the game. Of course, Jimmy Gordon really hated Brian Clough, but he came with him from Derby to Leeds. Because he just, a lot of people felt like this. I think they would do anything for him, even if they didn't like him, as a person.
Now this track is Deep Purple, and this was one of the most anguished sections, trying to find the right piece of music for the arrival of Leeds on this day.
Yeah, so what was our favourite? Led Zeppelin.
It was cut to Led Zeppelin originally, which was
a little expensive.
Yeah, it was. I remember seeing it with the Led Zeppelin. Come from the land of the ice and snow. Fantastic, but this is just a great track as well.
And this actually, this is, if you look one way, you're seeing Chesterfield FC, and if you're looking the other way, you're actually back in Leeds in the same terrace of houses that we were filming earlier. And if you notice, there's no shot where you see both the ground and the street. And it's because what I wanted to do was situate the ground in the middle of this group of working class red brick terraces. I went on a pilgrimage to the actual baseball ground site in Derby, and all I could find in the middle, sandwiched between a construction site and an old factory and some terraced houses and a bit of wasteland, was this one bricked up doorway saying reserved seating, about 10 foot wide. And that was all that left was of the baseball ground. But I understood how it was situated in the heart of this, this working community with factories and trades all around it. So I wanted to make sure that our Chesterfield FC ground was put in that world, because I think football then was so much a product of its community. I mean, people would work a 5.5-day week. They would be down the factory on Saturday morning. They'd have a pint of beer at lunchtime. They'd go to the game, and that was their escape. That was their entertainment. And I think Clough kind of understood.
Of course, Tom, when we were recreating football like this, one of the things that was most challenging was the size of the crowd, wasn't it?
Yes, the little-known secret, which I can now reveal, is as you watch this scene, 2,000 of the enthusiastic Derby and Leeds supporters are in fact inflatable dummies, shipped over from the US, flat-packed. They made a previous appearance in another Michael Sheen movie, Frost Nixon, where they made up the crowd when Frank Langella's addressing that conference at the beginning of the movie. Many of the conference attendees at the tables are also the same dummies.
Colm Meaney, it's Don Revie.
And the coat, fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you know, Michael, actually, a friend of mine who's a big footy fan came to watch it while I was editing it, and he said, I don't understand how you put the real Colm Meaney in scenes with Timothy Spall and Michael and he literally thought at great expense.
The real Don Revie?
Sorry, the real Don Revie. Sorry,
Yeah.
and he literally thought at great expense we'd CGI'd the real man in.
Although I do think Colm looks like a cross between Don Revie and Roger Melly, the man on the telly, in this. It's the hairstyle. I keep expecting him to go bollocks all the time. Stephen Graham as Billy Bremner, fantastic wig. Stephen, who was just amazing in This Is England as the incredibly scary skinhead guy in Shane Meadows' film, and it's really exciting to get to work with him.
And he's a very good footballer. He played for Liverpool Boys as a kid, and he was the holy grail of a great actor who was a great footballer, who also was, I suppose, the right kind of height to play Billy. I mean, he wasn't a natural redhead, but my God, that was a hard part to cast. Scottish, sort of redhead who was also a great actor and could play football.
And there's a lot of stuff between Clough and Bremner that we just didn't make it into the final film, wasn't there? Which was a shame, because there was some great stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think you'll be able to see it on the DVD because those deleted scenes are in.
I have to say, this scene, that little boy there, Frank, fantastic. improvising away. But he did have a habit of saying things like, "He's not my real dad. Why are you calling Michael Brian?" And then when I went out, and Elizabeth, who plays Barbara Clough, she'd be saying, "Brian, Brian," and Frank would be going, "He's round there. He's hiding round the corner." And it was brilliant because he would improvise, but it was trying to get the right stuff. Because when he came out with stuff that didn't spoil the scene, it was great. Wasn't it?
He was a ruthless opponent of the willing suspension of disbelief.
Yes, he was.
And I love this scene for a whole different reason, because it's just like my life at home. Because Pete Morgan rings me 2 or 3 times a day, regularly during meals. The phone goes, and I said, "I better get it." I said, "Why?" "Well," someone says, "It's Pete. It's always Pete."
Of course it's Pete.
Of course it's Pete.
We managed to get a great picture of Frank Sinatra in there because Brian was a big fan of Sinatra and the Rat Pack, and we found this picture, and I really wanted to get a bit of Frank in there. You couldn't really use the music.
You listened to Sinatra a lot, didn't you, Michael?
I did. I listened to, I like to listen to music that the character likes when I'm doing it just in the trailer or whatever, and so I listened to a lot of Frank Sinatra. And in fact, the costumes, with Mike O'Neill, who did the costumes, when we talked about how Brian would look, we ended up looking for a more sort of classic look for him, more like the 50s, I suppose,
I
and
think
Sinatra, rather than going for the late 60s, 70s. I think as an overall thing for the film, we didn't want to push the idea of the late 60s, 70s, did we?
But I also think he's a product of his time. And in fact, it was the one, the only chat I had about Stephen Frears about the movie, before I did it, was he as you may know, was originally uncovered the book and gave it to Peter Morgan to do. Stephen felt it was very much a film about the 1950s and about that cultural inheritance, and I found that inspiring and helpful as a kind of frame of reference. I think there's a mistake sometimes when people do that period where they tend to make everyone current, and of course people don't dress currently. People portray the era they grew up in.
Yeah.
Now this next shot, I'm very proud of this because all those tower blocks are actually CGI. We shot this in Scarborough, and it didn't look amazingly like London.
If you look carefully, you'll see Spider-Man going between the one on the right and the one on the left.
And of course, I could create a very, sort of symmetrical two-dimensional
And I was counting the pennies
tableau.
at this point, not so keen. It was literally every tower block was another few grand. Anyway, we went to see the great Dave Mackay, didn't we, Tom?
Yeah.
Well, this is Brian McCarty playing Dave Mackay about to make his grand entrance.
He was very helpful.
Was he really?
Yeah.
Oh, it was brilliant to meet him, yeah.
And he was very gracious about Clough, I thought.
Who the bloody hell are you? My name's Brian Clough, and I had the pleasure of playing for England against you in an under-23 match. I remember you now.
I think we've all gone silent as we all enjoy this
Yeah,
so
that's
much.
great.
Bloody shiner.
And
You never stop fucking.
it was a bit of that because Dave Mackay did have quite extraordinary teeth, it seems, and Brian did want to do the blacking out thing to get the teeth going. I can't remember how much of that sort of got left in. I'm not sure. It did look quite extraordinary at one point.
It's very tricky because when you get, because you literally black it out, it's very hard for the black to come off in your
Now,
mouth.
maybe this is where I should finally out myself.
Yes.
To all these lads who are running up and down the steps that we had to do for hours with me sitting there reading the paper, that actually this was my idea to set it like this. And I apologise to you all now, if you're listening to this, that you had to endure the pain of running up and down these steps.
And it's a brilliant idea, Michael, because as a staging, I just love shooting it. I mean, there were so many, that kind of wide shot where the whole thing is framed in that kind of tableau is very strong.
Also,
And,
those wooden seats are so unusual. I
Yeah.
mean, it must be the only ground that has got those wooden seats left.
The old stomping grounds, Hartlepool and Sunderland. Very reasonable too. Just doing what's best for the club.
That'll be my club, Brian. My club.
Either sides. Get going, come on, move now.
that's Chesterfield again. I just love the distress on that, on the edge of the building.
Martin and Colin there as John McGovern and John O'Hare. Two Johns. They were great. It was funny, the way I was with the Derby players, because, we had the group of actors with the Derby players, group of actors with the Leeds players, and I did have a completely different relationship with the Derby players as I did with the Leeds players. I felt so much more affectionate towards the Derby players, and the Leeds players I found a bit more, the actors a bit more intimidating, I suppose. And so I remember, because of course John McGovern I think played for Clough at every stage of Clough's career.
Yes, yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
amazing.
And Michael John was so. I mean, of all the people I spoke to, he was so helpful to me and Andy, telling us about Clough. And I think the thing he said that I found really fascinating was he felt they were very clever at picking players who wouldn't have been obvious to other managers in terms of their talents. I mean, John McGovern had only been playing football for 1 year. He started playing football at 15. You know, he wasn't a fast runner. He didn't look like a natural footballer, but Taylor and Clough saw something in him, and of course, because of giving him that break, he was kind of bound to them with a very strong bond of loyalty, because he was very dependent on what they'd done for his career. And I think that loyalty was vital to the way Clough managed. And I think one of the things that was so hard in Leeds is he came in to manage a group of stars who had no loyalty to him. And I think you have to manage that type of team in a different way.
There was absolute chaos when we shot that bit with all the lads in the bath, wasn't there?
Yes.
And us pouring the drink into the cup and all that. It was madness.
And I was operating one of the camera, and the viewfinder kept getting misting up, so I had literally no idea what I was shooting.
This, of course, this song was one of the ones we could clear, and it works beautifully, I think.
Yeah.
We tried to get the whole idea of the marriage was important, wasn't it, all the way through and this was a sort of a key thing where you see Brian singing Love and Marriage, calling out for someone to come and dance with him. You assume it's going to be Barbara, his wife, but actually it's Pete Taylor.
And I think, you know, if there's a journey we went on the film, it's probably we became more and more interested in this marriage, and probably found the rivalry needed less screen time to establish it, because actually once you understand that he hates Don Revie, you get it very quickly, and it becomes quite it risks becoming repetitive or reiterative, whereas the Taylor Clough marriage has lots of nuance, and so it became a very key sort of parallel to the rivalry story.
Good Dean Martin quiff we managed to get for that scene.
Now, these intercuts were without doubt the trickiest thing in the edit. I mean, there was even
the flashbacks going back.
Yeah, and there was even a time when we explored a more chronological structure with it, basically a prologue flashing back and then catching up to Leeds and staying in Leeds. And in the book, of course, there are 44 of these intercuts, because every single chapter has an intercut between that day and then a chunk of the past. I think in the end, Peter Morgan and I found that what drove them was there had to be a story connection between where we were leaving one and picking up with the other.
This important moment here, because I'm about to go and do the first meeting with the Leeds team, which a lot of the Leeds players felt they never recovered from, because he came out and said what I'm about to say. That moment there of seeing the vulnerability somehow,
yes.
Seeing the fear, the anxiety on his face, then allows me to come and do what I'm about to do, I suppose, and make it not just be that Clough is arrogant and brash. And this moment was really important to me, where he doesn't know what he's going to say. He's not sure which way he's going to go. And then he goes, no, I'm Brian Clough. This is what I have to do.
And I love that idea that this key self-destructive moment is an improvised moment. It's not premeditated. And I think this is, Michael's right, this is the first time in the office we see his mask slip, and it's another reason perhaps why we didn't want to see his mask slip in the calendar interview, because it's kind of more important to see the vulnerability underneath for the first time here.
It could have all been so different, couldn't it? He could have come out here and said, right, I'm sorry, lads, I know I've said a lot of things about you in the past, but let's put that behind us, water under the bridge, let's move on from here. And, I've heard some of the players saying that, if he'd said that, maybe it would have all been different.
Gordon McQueen said for him it was, his reading of it was it's kind of all over because of the way he handled this team talk. And I think that was right. And I think what that led to was that we actually, where we cut the film, as you'll see from the deleted scenes, was all in the Leeds storyline, because actually the audience, I think, understands very quickly that he's fucked here. Because of the way he handles this, and by being true to what the ex-players said about the fact that it all went wrong at this moment, we needed to spend less time in Leeds, because I think it was kind of pretty. His failure was pretty obvious even from this point on.
Yeah.
It's definitely.
And I just felt like my decision, for Clough was that he decides I've got to. Best form of defence is attack. I've got to go out to gain their respect. I've got to dominate them. I'm not going to back off from what I've said before, because they'll lose respect for me if I do. So I'm going to go in there. I'm going to be upfront about it all, and I'm just going to take them by the scruff of the neck. This is difficult, and this is the way we're going to go through. Because of course the main thing is that these are all internationals. All these players, they're all at the top of their game. They've been the dominant force in British football, and the teams that Clough and Taylor together were able to, take to the top were teams that they took from nowhere. Derby, Hartlepool's, and eventually Forest. They were teams that they could mould and dominate. This was a team that they couldn't. It needed a different way of dealing with it. Here coming up now is the moment that my whole life became complete.
And you'll notice the number of edits involved in this.
No, one take. Look at that. Look at that. No wonder
It's very funny because Michael...
Look at this. Bang! Straight in the back of the net. Come on. There's no acting required here. Absolutely no acting. Like, see Don fucking Revie do that, eh? That was me just going, oh, yeah, and look at those legs.
It's funny because I said to Michael in rehearsals, do you need, a football coach or someone to come in just to sharpen you up or, help you practice for this? And he very graciously said, I think I'll be absolutely fine without any practice at all. And so I think there was a little bit of pressure when we finally came to the moment.
Of course we did have Simon
Clifford.
As our football advisor, who was brilliant and who worked on all the football stuff and also was really helpful to me in terms of Clough because he knew Clough and was really helpful to me not just in the footballing side but generally. Fantastic. I'm still recovering from that.
Oh no.
I did something to my shoulder that has never been right since. But that was, the fact that we never showed...
But that injury will drive you for the rest of your life now. It will give you your drive.
Exactly. Well, the fact that we never showed the actual anything to do with the injury for Clough. So if you know about the injury, then that scene that we just saw, it's sort of more painful in a way. You know that what's going through Clough's mind is something to do with the injury as well.
Yeah. This was a good example. This is a good example of how we had to make a key editing change in order to make the intercut work. So we fade down, having been told that, the person who's essential is Peter Taylor, because that takes us back into the Derby storyline and allows us to see Taylor in a different way. Now, in the old, the original full-length cut...
It was the chopping up the desk.
The chopping up the desk, which is on the deleted scenes. It's one of my favourite sequences, but we had to cut it in order to make the intercut play, because it was hard to go from Clough standing by the bonfire watching a burning desk back to Derby. It didn't feel necessary in the same way.
Even though I had to chop up 2 desks in the filming of it.
It was an incredible, feat of physical endurance.
And that scene, the chopping up the desk scene, there was an awful lot of debate about whether it should be in or whether it shouldn't be in.
Because it was probably, it all comes to this thing of the tone of the movie, and I think we all loved David Peace's book very much. But I think in the end, Peter Morgan and I both felt that there was a risk in the film that we would let who Clough became in later life after the tragic death of Peter Taylor, when his alcoholism had become clearly a visible force in his life. We didn't want it to overshadow the young Clough when at this moment he had his greatest successes ahead of him. And I think that's partly why we made the tonal adjustment.
Leeds United have the unfortunate habit of reminding them just how far they still have to go.
The book in 1974 is dominated by this first-person narrator, the inner voice of Clough, which is very angry and very dark. Once you decide not to portray it in the movie, and that decision Peter made straight away. Even in Saturday Night and Sunday Morning, we have Albert Finney's voice in his head for a few seconds, and then it's rejected. It doesn't tend to work very well in a movie. Once you see Clough in company, of course his wit comes to the fore much more than if it's about Michael staring into space with this angry voiceover.
I really like this scene because I really get a sense of these two men comfortable with each other, and the fact that they Peter can make fun of Brian and Brian laughs. There's a really moving interview years and years later after Taylor has died, because Clough and Taylor fell out and never made it up again before Taylor died. And Brian is asked something about Peter Taylor. How do you feel about Taylor now? Or, what are your abiding memories of Taylor? And you see Clough just get choked and tears come into his eyes, and he says, "He made me laugh." And that was the thing. Taylor made Clough laugh. There was an extraordinarily kind of close, loving relationship. And as complex as any marriage, and I think that's the tragedy that they never made things up between them. Just awful. And I think this scene says a lot about that relationship, just the way they are together, the way Brian feels Taylor sort of inspires him somehow, and there's a level of relaxation between them. Now this is something I put in because there's footage of Brian saying this, and the scene on the page actually starts with Longson's
with this line here, bang.
But from all the research I did, I was always trying to bring stuff in and that I saw, and
and there's little fragments of his coaching style. It's important to weave those in. And this the Chesterfield ground we painted entirely green, that the big stand that they're next to, and Eve Stewart, the designer, was very good at making choices that simplified the colour palette. I mean, the original thing was a mixture of red brick and blue, and it was fussy. And we were very keen to make the film as graphic as possible, and some of that involved simplifying the palette. And of course, Derby, the baseball ground was green in this period.
And a lot of mud on the.
I mean, God, we put tons of mud onto this pitch, and it kept sinking in too quickly, and I was desperately trying to make it look as terrible as the pitch at Derby County was in the archive. And of course it was famously muddy. I mean, these days, as some of you will know, the Premier League pitches, they pull up the turf every summer, reseed them, and it's a new pitch every season. Whereas in those days, obviously, if it was destroyed one season, it would never recover.
I'd just like to draw attention to Jim Broadbent's ears in this scene.
Yeah.
Sam Longston had the largest earlobes of any man that has ever lived. And Jim wanted to get this right, and so these little fake earlobes were made for him that are brilliant. I think you would never guess. He was very proud of them.
And I love all those references to the shock at a player getting £300 a week. Because I mean, this film, what's fascinating with it, it's the beginning of that incredible inflation in footballing pricing, where big business, media, celebrity, and the sport came together to create this inflation. I mean, I think they took the player caps off, which were limiting what footballers could get in the mid-60s. And this film is right at that moment of explosion before, I suppose ending with Sky Television transfiguring the game with the huge amount of money it brought in.
Now, this was a scene which I thought was very important. That we had more dressing room scenes that we filmed, but this was one of the few ones that actually remained, because obviously there's so many stories about Clough and the way that he is sort of bizarre, sometimes very unpredictable, spontaneous way of dealing with the players and in team talks, and the weird things that he would do to kind of motivate them or keep them on their toes, and to get that sense of unpredictability and danger, I suppose, and total dominance of his players. This was one of those scenes that we tried to get.
And it was a very, very exciting moment for me, Michael, because it was the moment. It was very, very early on in the shoot, and it was the moment where I completely understood your Clough. I thought I get it, and it's a brilliant interpretation. And I think that idea, what you showed here was this incredible control you had over Derby, and this the utter stillness in the room, the utter concentration of what he's saying, the fact he has the power to tease you or be a bit nasty to you, and his unpredictability. I mean, it's a brilliant performance.
Well, players like Martin O'Neill and John Robertson later on at Forest talked about how to get a thumbs up or a word of encouragement or of congratulations from Clough meant everything, meant absolutely everything. It was total loyalty, devotion, commitment to the man. And hearing about stuff from the Derby players as well, that Clough in the dressing room wanted eye contact with you, wanted to look into your eyes all the time, and that he felt he had almost a psychic connection to his players. It was so close. And it made me start thinking about sort of cult leaders and the way that, the way you would dominate these players and dominate them with respect and love, but fear as well at times. And
I love that shudder moment, that moment where you go, whoa. I mean, it's one of my, I mean, whenever you see it in the cinema, it gets a huge roar of laughter. It's a great choice, Michael.
No, this is a rather wonderful scene. One of my.
This
favorites.
was day one.
This was day one.
This was the first day that we shot.
Yeah, in the afternoon. Actually, we shot the whole scene in about 2 hours.
It was a brilliant idea to have the crowd standing up in front of those windows at the back there to indicate something's happened. That's a great visual. That shot is amazing, I think. Beautiful shot.
It's an interesting example of kind of what you can, what sometimes having thousands of people doesn't create magic. I mean, there's probably 12 people out there doing that. And it was fun. I was operating the camera, the big wide camera, and then Ben Smithard, my wonderful DP, was doing all this handheld stuff, and we were sometimes getting in each other's way, and sort of I was kicking him out of the way.
And also just in terms of what the scene's about, the utter frustration and impotence, I suppose, of being a manager when your team is out there playing. There's nothing you can do, really, or very little you can do. In fact, Brian used to say that, the match on Saturday is won or lost on Monday and Tuesday on the training pitch. There's nothing. Come the day of the game, he used to not even be on the pitch. He'd be up in the stand or in his office or whatever.
And I'm sure that's where Revie's famous superstitious rituals come from, is that anxiety about control, which is basically you don't have control, and so it creates this kind of strange set of rituals where you're trying to control the uncontrollable.
Great moment where they finally beaten Leeds.
No, that's one of my favourite sequences, this.
Because there used to be a scene, didn't there, at the half-time point in this match, where Clough comes into the dressing room,
gives them a bottle,
and he's got the bottle of champagne, and he's saying, "Congratulations, lads! Your plan to get me the sack is working. So I want you to enjoy the champagne and drink." And he won't let them go out for the second half until they finish the bottle of champagne. And then there was a kind of a parallel scene at Leeds much later on where he tries to do something similar and it doesn't work. And the Leeds
one of the
players
biggest debates,
walk
wasn't
out.
it, in the whole film was just how much football should there be in archive and of the stuff we shot.
Yeah. Well, it's the infamous thing about football films, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not many work.
Yeah. And you all protected me from that. I mean, in that certainly Peter from the beginning said, don't shoot too much football because it's very hard to stage. But I think you need to see a bit, because you need to see how physical the game was and also how Leeds play, because it's so central to why Clough gets frustrated with it.
And it's fantastic to watch this footage. I mean, it's great. But in the context of the film, it's easy to understand because it's just Derby are winning and going up the chart, so it's up to the table, so it's kind of anyone can follow that, but at the same time it is just such a pleasure to watch it.
Some Brian Clough. I heard all the way in America that this fella talks too much. They say he's another.
And this was, when we uncovered this in research, in pre-production, what a gift. Muhammad Ali.
Are you going to stop it? No, I'm going to fight him.
Oh, love the way you do
Great
that.
little scene. I love that.
Yeah, it is nice though. But the very first thing I ever saw when I was doing the research, I just put Brian Clough's name into the YouTube search engine, and up came an interview between Clough and David Frost, which originally we had in the film.
It's quite surreal.
And I ended up telling David Frost, "Oh, you're in the film." And
so
and
I'm
then
now
it
going
got
to
cut.
ask you live on DVD commentary. I got a message at some point that there was a thought that you could play Clough. You could play Frost as well, interviewing yourself. Now, did that come from you or did that come from your agent?
It didn't come from me.
I'm slightly relieved.
What came from me originally was that I would play Revie, Clough and Taylor in some
A much
strange
more
Peter
modest
Sellers
suggestion. That would actually be quite Clough-like.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Now, the book, The Damned United, obviously the film is based on, used to have, before it had the cover that is now the poster of the film, used to have on the cover the picture of Clough coming out at Wembley with on his first day in charge of, his first match in charge of Leeds, this Charity Shield match. And, that's a picture that I just, looked at so much. And so it's always weird seeing me in the suit and the tie and that look, and tried so hard to kind of recreate that look for the film.
And yes, in that image of him leading out, you see his cockiness and the kind of these surly faces behind. And it's an image, it kind of expresses the essence
there's
of it.
something on his face, and I couldn't even tell you what it is, but it's absolutely at the heart of what I tried to do in this film. And it's weird that it's like I couldn't tell you what that look is on his face. There's so many things in there, the look as he leads them out, and it's what was, I don't know, behind everything I was trying to do. Really.
Remind me of Gordon McQueen in that moment, that little grin.
Well, we did a lot of improvising in scenes, and scenes where all the Leeds players are really against me and leave the room as I'm standing there trying to encourage them or whatever. But the last person to go was always Gordon McQueen.
Yeah.
Gordon McQueen, against all the rest of the players, totally in love with Brian Clough. It was wonderful.
It's a little subplot.
Yeah, it's a little the hidden secret story within the film.
And you've just seen, we just passed a couple of our biggest CGI shots when we recreated Wembley in that big wide with Bremner scratching his balls. It's basically the stadium is built in CG using architectural plans of the original Wembley, and peopled with computer-generated extras using a chaos software, which is what they also used on Lord of the Rings to program people fighting each other in, in scenes of thousands of people. And that's also, we've stitched together a number of different plates of crowd to create that. And you'll notice if you look carefully and still frame it, that certain individuals appear more than once. Now, we actually shot this as well as using the archive, and in the end, I mean, Peter's instinct was to use the archive, and I think he was right, because there's something about the thrill of realising it's all true, and it's such great footage.
This Liverpool team were the team that I supported when I was a kid. Keegan, Toshak. So it was weird to be leading out the Leeds team with my team next to me as we came out. Look at this. God. Remember, this is the Charity Shield match.
Yes. It's meant to be kind of like a friendly, isn't it, Michael? But I mean, the interesting thing is that because of the way football's shot now, I mean, you have 15 or 16 cameras. They're all slave to recorders that can play back in slow-mo, and they're all recording all the time. And so that, this kind of off-the-ball jabs and fights, I mean, you can't get away with it now. And I think it has affected the style of people's play, because I mean, people, Gordon McQueen was saying in those days you could, if the referee wasn't looking, you could kind of do anything and you'd be fine. Whereas now it'll be televised to everyone on the big screen seconds later.
What is going through his head at that point?
William Bremner, your conduct in the Charity Shield match was deplorable and cannot be tolerated.
Yes, we used to have a nice scene of them on the coach where Clough can't resist having a go at Bremner. Yeah. But in the end, it's about the sort of the power of storytelling economy is such that you kind of know that Bremner and Clough are at odds, and it felt indulgent to keep him.
What?
I mean, Peter and I do tend to be quite rigorous in cutting about not having scenes that don't drive the story forward.
Did you take that jacket home, Michael?
I didn't. I love that jacket. Look at that. I found a picture of Clough on the day that he went in for the interview for the England job, the first time, and he had a jacket almost exactly like that to go and meet the top brass. And I thought it might be something quite nice for this scene to wear that. It's a good look, isn't it?
It's fantastic.
So that's one of my favourite shots in the film.
I love this. The colours in this scene, the blue. For some reason, it makes me think of Japan. I don't know why, this hotel room, but it's that sort of strip light and the window at the top.
And this is a classic example of, however much you plan what you're going to shoot. I just saw, we shot the scene, I saw it out of the corner of my eye, that reflection, and probably took 3 minutes to do a take through the mirror, but sometimes what you see on the day, if you're quick enough to capture it, because you're always fighting time, becomes the thing you're sort of happiest about.
And I love
actually, it's
painting.
A disused police station in Bradford, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which oddly enough became a big battle, because it was very vital that we secured it, because it kind of offered so much of this period.
The art direction in these two locations here, the hotel room and Peter Taylor's living room, is just brilliant, I think. The blue and the red in this, and then the green and that painting behind Taylor's.
Of those two horses running free, which is like sort of...
Yes. The spirit of Taylor and Clough running free.
Yeah, with just the edge of the third horse, i.e. Don Revie.
It's all planned, almost all planned.
And the grade, we spent a long time on the grade, and we were very inspired by the way colour is affected over time from old pictures and old archives. So we took primary colours and we twisted them in the way that reflecting the way colour deteriorates over time or ages over time from that period. But we try, but without it being too nostalgic. It's not a sepia tinted view. It's quite vibrant.
And the Clough in that hotel room, and we come back to that hotel room later on a couple of times, and that is about as dark as it gets, really, for Brian. And it's
that's about as David
much
piece
more
the
feeling of the Peace novel in this.
They've got quite a tricky challenge. They face Leeds United.
Look at that street. That is incredible, isn't it?
So these little radio pieces that were written mostly by Peter, not all, but mostly
in post as well. Yeah.
I think were very helpful, weren't they, in connecting the stories?
Yes, Peter's clever and he's not scared of exposition. You know, he kind of does understand that you have to orientate people. And I think the thing that was hardest about the intercutting is when I sat down to edit it, the first thing we did, we just had wipes taking you from one storyline to another, and we had no idea when we started editing that we'd need to really orientate people. And I came up with this idea of the clock ticking backwards and forwards as a way of just settling people into the time changes, and that was a breakthrough moment. Because before that, it was confusing, and partly it's because Clough and Taylor aren't that different and don't look that different. And if you're historically accurate about it, they didn't. I mean, his hair was pretty similar, and so he doesn't tell you that the times changed.
I mean, there was always the thing of that actually doesn't really come out in the film so much, but I thought it might help a bit more, which is the suntan.
Yeah.
Because, of course, when you see Clough with the suntan, it must be at Leeds, and without because he's been on holiday in between, before he goes to Leeds, and without a suntan. And I thought it might be a quick visual reference, but because of the grading, it doesn't really come across.
And also, it's funny, you don't, when we try to push it, we did try and push it through more in the grading, and it risks looking fake very quickly if you amp it. I love also the attention to all the mud on the walls, and we're endlessly making it dirtier. It's a great scene, isn't it?
This was a big day. This day, I remember we had a few big scenes between me and Jim that day, and this speech that I'm about to do now somehow gets to the heart of Clough. Somehow there's the arrogance, the combative nature, the anger, the bitterness, the frustration, all coming out at this guy, this Longson, who originally, when they were at Derby, they were like father and son almost. There was very close relationship, and it all went terribly, terribly sour. And I think, you see in this, there's all the feelings that Clough had about how he was treated after the injury, and how he felt like he was left on the rubbish heap, is all coming out against this guy who represents everything he wants to fight against and have revenge against.
I remember when you did the first take of this shot we're watching, and I was just so blown away by it. I mean, all the stuff you were thinking about just came out in a rich execution from the very first take, and you are extraordinary. You don't flounder around for a couple of takes and then find it. You always come to it with a brilliant execution, and particularly here.
I feel like, thank you very much, but I feel like, it was a tight shoot. This we had a tight schedule, didn't we? And I feel like I need to come. I want to be as open as I can to what's going on in the day and what people are doing, but I have to come with the goods, because there's a high chance that you're not going to get many goes at it.
And that's the hidden story of films, is actually dealing with the schedule pressures. Is the constant challenge, really.
Now, this was the single most miserable moment of my life, doing this scene, and I think for most of the lads on this as well. It was freezing cold,
wasn't it?
And
that's a rain machine just absolutely soaking us every time, and it was just horrendous, this, and all the poor extras as well. But it looks amazing. It's all a bit Raging Bull, all this, the slow down and the noise is fantastic.
Yeah. And there was a great Derby Leeds game that inspired some of the action in this, where you did see McGovern fly off and hit that white wall, and he was bleeding. And it was a much rougher game, and it reminds me of rugby, really, when you watch football in the late 60s.
Well, one of the sort of research things for me was this Sporting Life, the film, Richard Harris and Rugby League, and there's a real feel of that in some of this.
Yeah.
You bloody fool.
Although I was also
a bit Noel Coward at that point.
No, we shot the other way, did we? But it was more powerful not to see it in a way.
Yes, I might have been accused of going a little over the top on the blood as well.
Yeah, it was like the Somme in that
the ketchup.
Yeah.
Now, his reaction to the Juventus match, apparently, for our purposes, we concentrate on him talking about not having the squad and, because of what Longson's done and all that. But he refused to talk to the press after that match because it turns out that the referee had been bribed by the Juventus manager, and there was all kinds of dodginess going on. Yeah, and Clough refused to speak to the press afterwards. He said, "I don't talk to cheating bastards," and that was one of the major reasons why he didn't get the England job, apparently, because they were scared of an international incident, which may well have been the case.
That's fascinating.
Been having it for 3 weeks, they reckon, one way or another.
At one point, strangely, the heart attack scene was out of the script. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Was that a shame?
Well, it's a difficult thing to get right because the risk was it could be a bit soap opera. Suddenly, we need some drama. Suddenly, Peter Taylor's having a heart attack. But I think it was important because particularly because of what happened to Peter Taylor after the story ends.
Still got jobs. We have.
And this was a real location. It was a kind of old, disused hospital where, and these colours we found. I think we found these colours without having to paint them. I mean, they're very. And again, in terms of going back to that 50s palette that I was talking about, it's got a very strong sense of sort of Technicolor movies of the 50s to me.
You and I feel it is impossible to.
And even with Taylor having had a heart attack in his hospital bed, Brian still
can't resist.
Still says all this stuff and does all this stuff and just doesn't see that what effect that might have on Taylor.
I don't want to resign.
Don't worry.
It's a lovely lilac shirt, isn't it?
But it will strengthen our position and force them to get rid of Longson.
I mean, this became a very important moment, didn't it, when Taylor talks about this thing that's inside Brian that sometimes is good and makes things happen and has an energy, but other times messes everything up and is self-destructive.
Also, I mean, if people wonder, so a couple of people said, how much of Clough's alcoholism is in the movie? Should there be more? And to me, you are dealing in Clough in some ways with the alcoholic personality in terms of that ability to self-destruct or dismantle great things in your life and that pull towards that. And I think Taylor is trying to address that in the scene.
Because, of course, at Hartlepool, he had managed to get rid of the chairman. He because of what he'd done at Hartlepool, he built this team up, done really well, and there was a power struggle between him and the chairman. He wanted to get the chairman out, and he did. He managed it. And then when he came to Derby, he thought he could do it again with Longson, and because he needed to kind of totally dominate not just the team but the town as well. I mean, he had sort of political ambitions as time went on, and he never really fully went down that road. But I mean, it was about trying to help. Not just to make the team and the football club the focus of the town or the city, and you see what he did at Derby, what he went on to do at Forest. He had his ambitions were way beyond just a football club, and that dominance, that desire to rule. There's something obviously dictatorial about it. He said, but of course Longson takes him at his word, and Derby never did really recover. I suppose it could have all been so different. Some people believe that, if Clough had stayed at Derby, then it would have been Derby winning the European Cup in a couple of years' time. And Derby would have been a dynasty, like he says in this scene.
There's something about the hubristic nature of this storyline with the film coming out, in 2009, when there seems to be this national appetite for a few other people to say sorry and have some hubris about a few financial cock-ups that have been made. It's interesting that hubris is so central to our story.
Of course, this is the real boardroom in Chesterfield again.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a great location.
I was very proud of the end of this shot where I throw my jacket along the table.
Yes, surprise. Guess which take this is? Take one.
Is it really?
It is take one, yeah, straight in the middle.
John Craven.
But and John came in to redo this voiceover to link it to you and Taylor, and I mean I think I was almost more excited meeting him than sort of many Hollywood stars because he kind of was my childhood, and he was the Arab-Israeli conflict for about 10 years of my childhood.
There's the real Brian Clough where he turned up at the ground and everyone went mental.
And then
I mean, this whole sequence, this area of the film, I mean, you could do a film just about this, couldn't you? About what happened in the days after the resignation and then the players getting behind him.
And I love the audacity of that. It's the real Brian Clough and it's the real Longson, and we just throw it in as a wide shot, and it flows.
Of course, the weird thing of the fact that there was the power cuts.
Yeah. This was tricky getting this exposition in, was it? Because we tried to take it out, and it was like, why is everyone suddenly holding candles?
We, the undersigned players, are unanimous.
Love that orange.
For Mr. Clough and Mr. Taylor, and ask that they be reinstated as manager and assistant manager with the club.
There's a French film called Seul contre tous that I also remember being inspired by, which was just brilliant at just in the choice of a wallpaper, it would transform a shot from being sort of pedestrian to brilliant. I remember looking at that as well.
There's a painter called The Potato Eaters, isn't there, by is it Van Gogh? Which I don't know, for some reason this scene reminds me of.
In the evening paper.
I signed that fat fuck.
And one of my favourite lines, that fat fuck.
Yeah.
A beautiful life.
Which I think at one point we worried whether it was too much in the edit, and then of course everyone roared with laughter when we first screened it, and we thought, no problem.
It's a Gerard Manley Hopkins type line. That fat fuck.
I love this place. I'm happy here. So are you. It's not over yet, Pete. Lawyers are issuing a writ tomorrow against Lonson.
That wallpaper as well. Again, it's all, you know, that 70s look is always there, but I always feel like it's not. I'm really glad that it's not kind of going. Look at how 70s this is.
I know. I mean,
it's funny. It's not. It's just supporting everything.
It's I wanted it to be restrained.
Yeah.
Chairman of Brighton and Hove Albion.
We're back at Elland Road, in front of a sign we
Joe
put up.
Dempsey playing Duncan Mackenzie.
Yeah. Wonderful actor who had a couple of great scenes that if I could refer you to the deleted scenes, that
well, I
you'll
really
see
like
them.
the scene of when we're in the bar, and I try and get them to be my eyes and ears in the dressing room and all that. That was a really nice scene.
I think the reason, if you watch those and wonder why we took them out, it's because the idea that he needs spies to tell him that the players are against him and that Bremner, Giles and Hunter are against him is, by this point, it's so bloody obvious that there's tension. But
I always think of this as the Clockwork Orange scene for some reason.
Yeah, I always worried it looked a bit like Flashdance with the way they tuck. Tracksuits are tucked into their white
I'm glad
socks.
we cut the dance routine that we used to do. Yeah,
it didn't quite work, did it, Michael?
But this was extraordinary doing this scene because the line was bollocks to Don Revie, and I sort of made the choice to shout it out because just in the background there, just round to the left, is the Don Revie stand, and the seats say Don Revie written on it. And to shout out bollocks to Don Revie in Elland Road felt, and it echoed around the crowd, felt like just sacrilege. It was awful.
But there's something about shooting in the real place. It's like you doing your team talk on the turfed out car park, standing in the very place where it happened, and then in the very tunnel. It not only gave it an authenticity, but I think it all it helps us because it made it very real. I hear it.
There it is.
I know. I kept thinking someone was going to come and shut us down
from filming.
I can't overstate how grateful I am to Leeds United for their generosity in allowing us to film here and taking the long view that in the end it's all part of their rich history and celebration of the golden period. And the fact that the players who came the other night really liked it, I thought was important.
I remember the first time I played this scene, I played it much angrier, and then I think I remember Peter Morgan coming up and saying, "No, you pull it back," and ended up playing it very good. Peter MacDonald as Johnny Giles.
I love that bit with just the crowd and the. I mean, again, we shot a scene to go after that, which is wonderful. It's on the deleted scenes, but the economy of him going up with the roar of the crowd and the caption, and taking us into the scene, it's hard to match. Those feet.
So it's one of the only times I can think of where a caption gets a laugh as well, which is earlier in the film, I think, isn't it? Where,
the 5-0.
Right, and it always gets a good laugh.
Now, this is one of the hallmarks of a Peter Morgan film, isn't it? The
late night drunken phone call. What are you saying?
Yeah. And again, this is probably as close to the tone of the book as we ever get in the film, where Clough is in this kind of hell,
and the way he's just you're sort of sandwiched at the bottom of the frame, and there's just that strip of darkening sky at the top. It's kind of
and they love the frou-frou little lampshade.
Yeah, wasn't that based on actual pictures of Don Revie's house?
There was a great, rather stagey moment in a documentary where his wife was serving him breakfast in bed on a Sunday morning with the papers, and that lamp was in. So it's in our film.
Clough's just been looking at the test card, drinking and in hell.
Now we come to a different kind of hell. We did a lot of these opening shots actually a couple of months after the shoot because we filmed the dialogue scene in Scarborough because we couldn't afford to sort of completely relocate to Brighton. But so it was great to situate it in the real Brighton. If you look carefully, you can see the chips being thrown at the seagulls to encourage them to be there. And I love all these sort of...
Look out for the guy on the Zimmer frame in the back of the shot when we're in the hotel bar. It's quite funny. Count how many Zimmer frames there are in this scene. Sorry, Andy.
No, I was going to say, I do love Rob Lady's music, but this was originally Albatross by Fleetwood Mac, but there was a bit of a row about the rights just at the last minute, so we had to take it out, which was a great shame.
It's another great outfit. The great comedy character, northern comedy character, John Shuttleworth, was the inspiration behind this look for me as Brian in this scene.
I love this look, yeah.
The green polo neck and the brown suede
I remember I had
jacket.
a nightmare on this day because there was a modern car park right behind, right in the middle of that shot there, and we had to, try and get the police to come and move it. And it's amazing what can completely stump you on the day.
Again, one of my favourite lines. Look where we are. We're almost in France. Great line.
Yeah, I remember that when Peter and I were working on the script in prep, and I think Andy, you had the idea of saying, can we point up how much the game used to be more local, and it inspired Peter to come up with that great line.
Yeah, that's a very good speech.
But so, that sense of I think that sense of tribal and local loyalty in football teams, I think a lot of that has gone because they're kind of just bankers who can pay for the best players they can get from anywhere in the world.
Well, the idea of being able to buy success in football now is, it's why no one will ever be able to do what Clough did, because no one will ever be able to take a team from the second division and take them to the top of the Premiership, because you just can't do it. There's a invisible force field around the top half of the Premiership League now.
But is it? I mean, surely we're looking at football at the biggest bubble that's yet to burst as well. I mean, we're in a time of great bubbles and busts. That bubble seems to be unaffected, and I mean, surely, when Kakko was offered £500,000 a week and said no, I kind of thought, is that going to be looked back on as the great sort of apex of the football bubble?
You look back now when Clough bought Trevor Francis, first £1 million player, and you think, and that was, I remember thinking, the world's gone mad, £1 million for a player. In fact, he didn't pay £1 million.
But isn't that the mark of a bubble when you keep saying this is crazy and it keeps going?
Yeah.
Oh, there he was. There was the Zimmer frame man.
Mallorca. 48 hours in Mallorca to get this.
Yeah.
Just as a little Brian, in true Clough style, he didn't pay £1 million for Trevor Francis. He paid £1 less because he refused to pay £1 million. Look at that. That is what it's all about, isn't it?
And this was a great hotel. It was from the late 60s. In the actual place that it all went on.
One of the very few examples in my life of actually you seeing a photo from, because you send people out to do photos to recce stuff, and it was one of the very few times I saw the photo, I said, that's the location, without feeling like I needed to visit every hotel in Mallorca.
You still made us look at every other one, I think.
Yeah, well, it's not as bad as the 100 I didn't go and visit. And this is obviously a key moment, finding out about Revie.
And this was the very last thing we shot, wasn't it? Pretty much.
We might have done a few cutaways.
I was always a bit concerned about the whole England storyline thing of, Ramsey leaving, Revie getting the England job, Clough wanting the England job as well, and all that stuff. And there was a time, I think, when we talked about the idea of going into that a bit more, and so that when Clough found out that Revie had got the job, that was a much bigger blow to him, and all that kind of stuff, because the ultimate question was always, why does Clough agree to go to Leeds?
Keith Archer, I'm secretary of Leeds United Football Club. I was sent by my...
I mean, do you think in the moment that he said yes, he was troubled by, obscurely realising this was a bad decision, or do you think when he said yes, he kind of felt optimistic, and how troubled do you think in his heart he was?
It gets to the heart of, I suppose, what it's all about in a way, is that his choices up in his life up until that point made it inevitable that he had to agree to it, in that it was the top job. I mean, the very top job is the England job. Revie had been given that, so that the other top job in club football became free, which was Leeds. If Clough was to say no to it, then it would be admitting failure in some way, admitting weakness, admitting that he wasn't quite as good as Revie because Revie's record was so great there, but there was still a chink. He could still win Europe. And I think that was the thing that he held on to. He wanted to be able to go to Leeds and do better than Revie so that he would then officially be the best manager that there was. And he couldn't let himself not do that. It wasn't enough for him to know that he was the best. It had to be proven, and people had to admit it in print that he was the best. And so he couldn't, no matter what he'd said about the Leeds players, about Revie, he couldn't not go there, even though I think he probably knew that it was a really bad idea. He just couldn't stop himself because he's Brian Howard Clough.
I mean, it's like Alex Ferguson leaving and being offered the Manchester United job. It's there was such a big team.
There's also the story that the Leeds board thought they were getting Taylor and Clough, and that that Clough called the press, told them to come down to the hotel where he was meeting the Leeds board, and the press were outside waiting, and then he told them, no, Taylor's not coming. And they
before the board knew.
And then the board felt that they had to then announce that Clough was coming to Leeds because the press were all there. Whether that's true or not.
No, I think that's certainly corroborated by a couple of things I heard. Yes, I mean, so the Leeds board, it wasn't like they were naive or ignorant about Taylor's importance.
Because Taylor didn't want to go, and I think Clough knew that Taylor was probably right, that they shouldn't go there. But he couldn't stop himself.
Yeah, hence how angry he gets. Yeah. This is definitely one of my favourite shots. It's funny how, I mean, it was again snatched at the end of a day when Michael probably felt, oh my God, do I have to go through it all again? But it's funny how sometimes those things that you fight for, or you kind of think, do we need yet another wide shot? And then this one just happened to be the most interesting ones we did. But I like that thing of just making you tiny after all those close-ups and just this small figure in a landscape, and the way your body movement pulls in the sound of this game and the commentary.
Now, this is real commentary, of course, not from the actual era.
Yeah, and this is, all the shots of the pitch are Chesterfield FC, and all the shots of the dugout and the stands are Leeds United, because we couldn't play on the pitch at Leeds because they were reseeding the pitch.
Yeah, this was horrible. Filming this was really horrible.
I mean, it's like a goldfish bowl, wasn't it?
Yeah, and just you see the shot when everyone's singing and banging on the glass and looking at me, and it was, and Stephen Graham sitting next to me as Bremner and feeling like everyone hates you all around you. It's just...
I was fascinated visually how in those days you weren't protected from the fans. I mean, and in the Derby ground, there were fans actually round and even beneath you. There were little kids in front of the box, and whereas now you're kind of in your own... You're a bit more protected, aren't you, Michael, in a big football...
Now, am I right in thinking that this scene originally, when Manny Cousins is there and tells you, this is when I went up and was told, thinking that I was going to be, sacked, but actually went up...
No, that was a different scene. That was a different scene. Can I just point out the angry Yorkshireman swearing at him is actually me, in a rare example of my acting making anywhere in any cut, because normally, as Michael can tell you, it's not very good. Poor Michael had to suffer me impersonating Clough many times on the shoot, which I found irresistible, even though it was probably terrible. Yeah, no, there was a scene we shot with rain, I think.
Because there was a kind of a scene where he thinks that this is going to happen, but actually he turns up and they've Manny Cousins is saying that they've got company cars for him and all the players and stuff.
I love the design of this room that Eve Stewart did.
As far as I can see, there's no relationship.
And this this is pretty accurate to our understanding of what went on in this scene, isn't it? I mean, in history.
Perhaps if Mr. Clough was to step outside, we might be able to speak our minds.
Again, the kind of wider angle lenses framing Michael in this sort of stark architecture.
All right. If you wouldn't mind, Brian.
I mean, I've always assumed this was no one had ever been sacked as a football manager after 44 days in this period. Is that true, Michael?
As far as I'm aware, yeah.
I mean, would have been. I mean, now we're kind of used to it with Scolari being kicked out of Chelsea so quickly, and.
But of course, because of the payoff that Clough got, there's a theory that it was he only was able to do what he did at Forest because he got paid off.
Because he got financial security.
He got financial security.
I know, it's ironic.
Leeds. So in a way, the whole success of Nottingham Forest could be put down to the failure at Leeds, that they're so intrinsically linked.
It gave him the freedom to kind of take that job on.
But this was an important moment, wasn't it, to get in terms of the vulnerability and seeing the cost to Clough of being Clough. This moment, hearing what they say and seeing that hurt. It's important to get that.
And it's only really in those moments when no one's watching you apart from the camera that we can be, it's the only time you let your mask slip actually when you're kind of private.
And then again, we can come in hard on the arrogant, the tough Clough in this scene, but because we've just seen the hurt and the pain and the vulnerability at the end of the last scene.
So, what do you want to do about it?
It's not working. We have to part company.
Fine, it'll cost you 25 grand.
This is a lot of money, isn't it? And also paying the income tax.
Yeah, and the fact that he got the money for Jimmy Gordon as well, which is a very generous thing to do.
Throw in the Merc and all.
What?
Might be a bit flash for a man out of a job, but the truth is I've grown to like it.
Who do you bloody think you are?
Brian Clough. Brian Howard Clough.
I used to have as a mantra, now and again, it was sort of a bit of a joke between me and Peter Morgan, but the mantra of Brian Clough, Brian Howard Clough, Brian Clough.
Yeah.
Brian. If you could listen inside Clough's head at certain points, you just hear Brian
hear
Clough,
that.
Brian Howard Clough, Brian Clough.
Neurotic
Brian Howard
repetition. I love the way Austin Mitchell plays this. Mark Baisley.
Mark Baisley as Austin Mitchell, who obviously is in The Queen as well. And
who sat
Alistair
next
Campbell.
to me also. The Yorkshire Pro sat 2 seats away and chortled with laughter, but I was quite disconcerted looking at Austin Mitchell on screen and Austin Mitchell on my left.
Again, this is, real interview.
In real place, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A place that now Yorkshire Television is being shut down, so it's the end of these studios. So again,
on the DVD, are there going to be the actual interviews that we base these on the DVD? Do we know?
I'm not sure.
Not sure.
No, I don't.
Well, I advise anyone watching this to go on YouTube or something and watch these actual interviews, because they are extraordinary. And this one in particular is an extraordinary interview when you watch the actual thing. And they really did surprise Clough with Revie. Really was on the day that he'd been sacked. In fact, there's some footage that you see some real footage where you see Manny Cousins, who Henry Goodman plays, and Clough being interviewed on the steps the day that he's been sacked. And it's a very sort of uncomfortable interview. And you see Clough eventually running away from the interview. And he goes from there, the steps of the club, Elland Road, to Yorkshire TV to do this interview, turns up, looks a bit dishevelled, looks a bit all over the place, and then was surprised with Revie sitting there. And it's incredible bit of footage to watch this actual interview. In fact, when I watched the interview, I felt like he was much more on the back foot, and in terms of the writing of this scene, there's a section of it where Clough, is really on the attack with Revie, and I found it quite hard to make that gear change because I was so used to seeing the actual footage where there's a very sort of different feel to it, but I think it worked out pretty well.
I always remember that approaching at one point and asking you to look straight at the video camera, and Michael politely said, well, as I've watched it 50 or 60 times, it wasn't on that line, and I wasn't looking straight at the camera, I was looking marginally to one side, and it was one of those humbling moments where I realised the level of preparation that Michael does is absolutely fabulous. One thing I'd like to share with people listening is, which kind of speaks to Michael's technical mastery, is if you look at the real Clough on the footage, his eyes are actually oddly can be quite dead when he's talking. They can be quite they're very contained, and Michael and I talked about whether we should whether we should sort of capture that part of Clough, and Michael was actually able to go, to show me what that looked like if you made his eyes so kind of neutral, and was equally able to show me if you brought more life into the eyes, and in the end we decided that it was better to have that life to let the audience in. But I thought it was an extraordinary example of Michael's skill, that he could say, you want him more like Clough or less, and you got to that amazing point that you could show me those nuanced differences.
Well, what I found is that the more work I do beforehand, because when you're there doing a scene like this, the worst thing would be to be sitting there focusing on, am I like Clough, right? Because then it just gets in the way. You want to be there and be free to be in the moment, listen to what Colm is doing as Revie, respond to what's going on in the situation, and to try different things, and just rely on the fact that all the work you've done beforehand will come into play at any given moment. That I can, something that you'll say, Tom, will make me think of something that Clough said or did, or something I've watched, and suddenly it informs the scene and can take the scene in a different direction. Whereas if I was just you know, if I hadn't done as much work beforehand, I'd be trying to do the work on the day, and it'd be too late, and it would stop me from being open to what else is going on.
And, you know, and again, the hidden enemy, which is time. I mean, we shot this scene and the first cannon scene all in one day, which was, you know, almost about 10 minutes of scene in 10 hours. And if you know, without that kind of preparation, you know, you wouldn't achieve this kind of sophistication that Michael and Colm have achieved.
Again, I mean, we talked about it a bit, you know, when I was talking about Frost Nixon in the past, but the idea that this interview anything like this could ever happen again.
I know, it's extraordinary.
And it would never happen. Look, the nakedness of this interview.
Yes.
I mean, it seems almost like if you hadn't seen the actual footage, you think, no, this never happened.
Yeah, there'd be
They'd
an
never
army of
allowed
advisors.
this.
There'd be some advisor just saying to Brian Clough, no, it's a bad idea. You know, that you'd have a PR agent or someone who would protect you from it. I mean, and I think that's kind of one of the reasons we love Clough is he didn't do the political, he didn't make the political choice. He didn't make the choice that kind of protected himself. He put it all out there so often.
And I suppose this is it, isn't it? This is the Greek nature of this story.
Yeah.
The man who, you know, defies the gods and has to be brought to his knees, the hubris thing. And here, this is the moment where when Revie says to him, you know, this is what you've done. You brought the game into dispute. You messed things up with Peter Taylor. You messed things up at Derby. And now you've messed things up at Leeds. And that moment of going, oh my God, he suddenly becomes humbled and realizes something. The fever has broken, the obsession has lifted somehow. It's a terribly, even though it's what you kind of want when you see someone who's arrogant and hubristic, you want them to be brought down. When you actually see it happening, you can't help but empathize and feel for him.
And again, to be filming in pretty much, you know, I think the studio shot in gave it an extra poignancy.
This is very Kubrickian moment, I think.
A very good score by Rob, I think.
Back in the car with those great kids.
Yeah, they were fantastic. All the kids were brilliant.
Do you think your old man is a fool?
It's so important because however good your film is, if you don't cast good kids, you can't hide from kids who aren't great, but these kids are great.
And of course, the youngest one there, Nigel Clough, just before our film came out, went back to Derby.
Very nice
Manager of Derby, and it was very nice for him to do that for us.
It was so surreal opening a newspaper as the film was about to come out, seeing, you know, Derby, Clough back in their headlines. It felt like a good omen, I must admit.
Who fancies a trip to the seaside? See Uncle Pete?
Me!
Yeah, me too.
So this is the...
Well, the extraordinary thing about this is that for the longest time the script ended. I mean, the film ended on this shot here. You know, the sign to Brighton, and I think Andy and I both felt that we needed to see him engaged with Taylor, and Peter. You know, Peter resisted it. I think because he felt that it was clear that they would reconcile. But in the end, he wrote this absolutely genius scene.
Well, this is in some ways a good example of how Peter works, in that a lot of what this scene ended up being came out of rehearsal as well.
Yeah.
It came out of Peter responding to what me and Tim were doing and what Tom was saying, and in working it, and it got to a point where me and Tim, I think, felt like we knew a bit more about the relationship and the characters, and just improvised a bit and played around with things, and Peter would watch, and then he'd come up with something. He has his laptop in front of him and is just responding to each reading of the scene, and then he comes up with suggestions, and then we try it, and then we come up with suggestions, and finally we got to this version of the scene, and and I think it works very well.
Actually, I remember feeling almost sort of this weird pressure when I shot this, because I just had this feeling that this would be one of these sort of iconic scenes in you know, I don't know why, but I just thought it was such a brilliant idea, this scene. It's almost, you don't kind of want that in your head when you're shooting. You don't want to start thinking, this is iconic. It's like you feel paralysed by it almost.
We had a number of tracks, obviously, in the cutting room that we were playing around with, and Man of the World by the original Fleetwood Mac was one of my favourites. But it was Melanie's idea to pop it right in the middle here, and I think it works quite brilliantly.
Well, I mean, I think why this scene's so essential is it ends up kind of explaining what the film's about, which is about this professional marriage, this kind of love story, if you will, between.
Well, it's
Taylor
the husband
and
who's gone off with the other woman, coming back and asking for forgiveness from his wife, isn't it?
And it's something that Peter talked about from the beginning. He kind of said it's a happily married man. Giselle comes into his life. He can't resist chasing this impossible dream of, shagging Giselle, and then eventually comes to his senses. And of course, our Giselle was Don Revie.
And it's kind of hard, as well as it being, they've come back together, the story is resolved, it's a sort of happy ending. When Tim, as Taylor says, it's not going to stop you doing it to me again.
I mean, I find that so moving, because I think so many people in relationships will recognise, whether work relationships or romantic relationships, will recognise the complexity of that kind of relationship where, that it's painful but somehow irresistible. And I think it's...
and especially knowing what did go on to happen.
Yeah.
He did do it again. They did fall out, and they never reunited, and it was one of the, greatest tragedies Brian felt in his life.
And I think it's, it speaks to people who have relationships with alcoholics. I think it has that kind of shape and complexity to it. And I think, in terms of how we address Clough's alcoholism, I think it's probably, that interchange crystallises that channel.
Yeah, and it used to be, didn't it, that the film ended with the information that they did argue again, they didn't resolve it. And in fact, we decided that it was a much better ending to have them, and truer to the spirit of the relationship, that it ended with them back together and not letting the audience know about the other stuff.
Yeah, but in some ways, I think this interchange here alerts you of that. I mean, it's a way of acknowledging to the viewer who knows their real story that we're saying we know that they're going to fall out again, and we know their relationship's going to be rocky. But I think in the terms, I mean, we took a long time, debating this, and actually, ironically, one of the key people who weighed in on the ending was Ron Howard, who saw it, sort of in the fall, and felt ending with archive talking about how they fell out again, and then Peter Taylor tragically died. Was threw him out of the film. And I think it's because we spend so long on the reconciliation to then basically put it all apart in 30 seconds. It's too much. It's too difficult.
It's a slightly surreal image, isn't it? Ron Howard watching this film
on a train on the East Coast on a laptop.
Bit weird.
I know.
Yeah.
But he obviously wanted to do the follow-up, Damned United 2.
Yeah.
No, I'm always very moved by it.
Yeah, you don't see many films about the love between two men that's heterosexual,
and particularly in this world that's so masculine and so physical. And
I find it very moving seeing the actual Clough and Taylor.
Well, it's interesting because again there was a huge debate about not having them speak. I mean, and in the end we did decide to give them their moment talking to each other, and I liked it because it kind of shows that how their relationship worked in miniature in that 30-second clip. I mean, of course we are a bit tougher on Don Revie in the titles than we are on Clough, because we draw the line with Revie later. But I suppose as we're making a film about Brian Clough, that's the reason. But it's more to do with the emotion, which is you don't want to draw the line too late with Clough.
There is very little footage of them together, really, isn't there? Talking.
Yeah,
Martin O'Neill.
The wonderful Martin O'Neill.
And that's John McGovern raising the European Cup.
That's extraordinary. I mean, to go from 15, 16 years old knowing Clough, to go all the way up to holding up the European Cup.
And he said after playing with all four teams, I can't say I knew who he was.
Yeah.
I didn't know him, and I think people who play with him talk about this fundamental inscrutability that they don't get close to him. I think the public remember him with a fond smile, and I think the players remember him in a more complex way. And this was much
something
debated.
about that look on his face there. That's my Clough.
Yeah.
That's who. Yeah. That's the image. It's something inscrutable, vulnerable, surprising, just extraordinary man.
And I think that was a way that final caption was a way of letting in the fact that the rest of it, that he didn't fulfill everything he wanted, but without going into too much detail. So and it also takes the story back to where we began, as we began on the hunt for the England manager. Of course, there's too many people to thank everyone individually, but I do want to thank the entire cast and crew for such an extraordinary job, and also I want to thank Leeds United, Derby County, and Chesterfield FC for being such a great stand-in for Derby County. But I'm very grateful to the Leeds and Derby players who met us when we were preparing it, because their advice was invaluable. I mean, John McGovern, Gordon McQueen, Dave Mackay, and Andy. I think you met some other players as well. I don't think it's people are surprised when I say this, but I don't think people realise that this film, was written for Michael Sheen. I mean, it's not like Peter kind of thought, I'll write a film about Brian Clough. Oh, who can play it? Michael Sheen. He wrote it because Michael was interested in playing it, and Peter's unusual like that. I remember when I did Longford with him, he'd written it because Jim Broadbent had said he was willing to play it, and there's something very special about work that's been created for an actor rather than doing the work and then kind of thinking who slots in. And I think that's why there's this, there's this particular affinity between Michael and this role.
I'd like to mention Penny Dyer, who I've worked with on everything that Peter has written that I've been involved in, and she is ostensibly the voice coach, dialect coach or whatever, but the work that we do together, it goes way beyond that, and she really is like my way into these characters, and the work that we do together has been absolutely invaluable, and she was brilliant in helping me in the work on this, and again I mentioned earlier, but Simon Clifford, who was the football advisor and who helped me in a lot of ways and just gave me a lot of support. And when he sort of said, I remember him watching one of the scenes on the training pitch and me bringing in some stuff into the scene that I'd seen in footage, and I remember him saying, that was it, you've got him. And I know that something inside me relaxed once he said that, and so I'd like to thank him.
Oh, well, I'd also like to thank Christine Langham, who is at BBC Films and was a producer with me in The Queen, has a long association with Michael as well on films, and she was absolutely magnificent in ensuring that the BBC backed this, along with Screen Yorkshire, who were fantastic, and Sony as well. It wasn't the easiest picture to finance, and it was some great satisfaction that we sit here doing this with the film having opened very successfully in the UK, and it's given us great satisfaction because getting the money to make a film that was intrinsically British and was quite tough, but it's been great.
And I mean, I'd like to thank my I suppose my secret Peter Taylor is Melanie Oliver, my editor, who cut John Adams for me, Longford, Elizabeth I, half Elizabeth I, and now The Damned United, and she's incredibly astute and becomes someone I go to with almost every key decision, and she's a real consigliere in my life, not just as well as a great picture editor. And I think I was very well served by my heads of department, Ben Smithard, the DOP's first time I worked with him. I thought together we found a really interesting, strong way of framing this story, and he's incredibly fast and gives you the maximum time to find your shots, and that was a great collaboration. Eve Stewart, I've mentioned before, I thought did a wonderful job on the production design.
And what about Peter?
And Peter Taylor, Peter Morgan. I know.
Peter Morgan.
Peter Morgan. The reason we're all here. I mean,
why is he not here? He's up a mountain in Austria.
No,
I mean, Peter Morgan, Michael.
I've never heard of him.
No, I mean, Peter, it's an extraordinary achievement he's done, and and he's he was so determined that the film got made as well, which was lovely. He's got such drive, and and very few writers get their stuff made with the regularity Peter has, and he's not just a great writer, but he's a great advocate of getting stuff made, and there are too many writers whose work stays in a drawer, and with him it doesn't happen. And I think that's fabulous.
And of course, I'd like to dedicate the work that I've done on this to Brian Clough and his family, Barbara and his children, and Elizabeth, Simon and Nigel, and I hope that one day they'll watch the film and see the affection and love that there is for Brian in it.